right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Friends of Five. My name is Matthew Perdomo.
And I'm Ryan Lasner.
And as always, we got a great guest for you today. Before we get to that guest, just want to make a quick reminder for everybody. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, follow us on YouTube, subscribe to the page. Those are one of the ways that you can help support us. And today's episode is going to be sponsored by Office Express Supply. Ryan's got something to say about them. What do you got to say?
Yes, Office Express Supply, family-owned business located in Hialeah. They focus and mostly focus on office furniture, janitorial supplies, any office materials, anything COVID-related. They have the best prices in town, and they love our show, so you should love them too.
All righty. So with that being said, let's get on to the guest. You want to introduce him, Ryan?
Yes, we have Jim Eichenhofer. Correct. With the Pelicans. We are so lucky to have you because the NBA season is about to start, and the hottest name in the sport belongs to you guys. So welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. I need a sponsor. I don't think I have any sponsors, so you guys are already ahead of me.
We'll help you out with that.
We have Biscayne Brew, right? That's another one of ours. But in this case, so the NBA season's starting up, ramping up again. It seems like the NBA made a point to have the Pelicans involved. Zion Williamson, man, you guys lucked out there in the lottery or so. So what do you think? I guess at this point, you guys are a couple of games behind Memphis with the easiest schedule. It seems like we're going to see a Lakers-Pelicans matchup, right?
Well, I don't want to say that yet because I feel like I think if the Pelicans can move into 8th place, right now they're 3.5 games behind Memphis, and obviously everyone's playing 8 games. So if they can pass them during these 8 games, then I would say, yeah, I'm pretty confident that they can beat Memphis if they have 2 chances to beat them. To only have to beat them once.
Right.
But if they can't make up that 3.5 game ground and they have to beat Memphis twice on consecutive days in the middle of August, I mean, I think they can do it, but it's tough to beat a decent, good team like Memphis back-to-back days like that. So, I mean, I think I want to wait and see how the seeding games go. The Pelicans actually did play really well head-to-head in the 2 games they played against Memphis during the season. And then in the seeding games, the 3rd game for both teams is Memphis versus New Orleans. So we'll get another chance to see them play against each other. The results have been very good so far for the Pelicans, but I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here because obviously the Pelicans also start with Utah and the Clippers in the seeding games. They can't afford to get off to a slow start before they even get to playing Memphis head-to-head. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be really interesting. And as you alluded to, I think a lot of people would love to see, and I'm not just saying this as a Pelicans guy, people around the NBA would love to see Lakers versus Pelicans in the playoffs if that does happen.
I agree.
Well, you're obviously not saying that just because you're a Pelicans guy, because that's what the NBA wanted. They literally made sure they got Zion Williamson a chance. You've seen Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, right? They sent the Pelicans a golden ticket. Okay, like let's be honest. Zion Williamson is he going to be one of the athletes that benefit from the whole
days off?
What is it? 3-month hiatus of no basketball.
I mean, it sounds like it because he talked about the other day about how he and his stepfather were able to get onto a basketball court pretty much every day during the hiatus of 3+ months. So I think everyone's impressed by the way he looks right now, the fact that he's really toned. It sounds like he was able to run every day. I know a lot of players weren't able to really get in the cardio that they needed to. So, I mean, I think he definitely could benefit from it just from the fact that he's able to do so much physically. And also, too, mentally, I think it's such a weird situation, obviously, in a million different ways. But for any rookie player to have a few months to look back at the success that he had and kind of maybe watch some film, look at some of the things that he did well, work on some of his footwork, I think, which is already great. But I'm really interested to see the impact that's going to have on him as well as some of the other rookie guys because – in a way, this is almost like the beginning of their 2nd season, even though obviously technically it's their 1st because they've had so much time in the offseason to kind of mentally prepare for the, I guess, Act 2 of the 2019-20 NBA season.
Nice. All right. So there's been comparisons and, it's usually when I first watched him, I thought Larry Johnson immediately, but Larry Johnson would not be a ceiling. Then people have said his footwork and his athletic ability is like a Charles Barkley. And then there's also been comparisons to Blake Griffin because I guess he just has the hops. Do you think that there's another player that he's similar to, or would you put him within those three?
No, I think those are all great comparisons. And I mean, I think, we knew, meaning like the media that covers the team, everyone knew for about 6 weeks between the lottery and the draft that he was going to be the number one pick and coming to New Orleans. So we had a ton of time to listen to people make comparisons. Obviously, a lot of people that have time to watch college basketball more than me and have, the expertise of watching him throughout the year that he was at Duke. And so we listened. I heard tons of those comparisons. The two guys that you named, or the three guys that you named, especially the first two, a lot of people said Larry Johnson and Charles Barkley. Right. But Blake Griffin is great too because of his explosiveness and his dunking ability. I think probably I don't think anyone's ever going to find one guy that they can say, okay, this is a good comparison to Zion. So I think the way that you put it is perfect as far as it's kind of a combination of all three of those guys that you can take different traits of them. Barkley, especially early in his career, was so athletic. Larry Johnson was powerful, that like kind of undersized power forward who had like small forward height, but was, a beast in the paint and could dominate that way. Also was pretty athletic and explosive on fast breaks. And then Blake Griffin, just some of the stuff that he could do as well at that size. So I don't think we're ever going to find one guy. That's how unique Zion is. We're never going to say like, okay, this is the player that he's the most like. You have to take all these different traits from players to figure out the best comparison.
Okay. Talk about the role that man, I'm drawing a blank right now. David Griffin is playing. I almost forgot his name. David Griffin is playing in Zion Williamson's for Zion Williamson right now, because I feel like he's taken a lot of the burden of the media away from him. Like, can you talk about that? Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that David Griffin probably did from day one was he said flat out, the season and the team isn't riding just on Zion Williamson, and that it would be unfair to expect a 19-year-old to carry a team that was coming off a non-playoff year. Obviously, also just traded, the best player on the team, an all-star, during the previous offseason. So I thought going into the season, it was hard when people asked me what the expectations were for the team, I thought it was really hard to kind of pin it down, just because I think it was, of the 15 guys on the roster, you had 10 brand new guys. You had 4 rookies. So what David Griffin did, I think, from the start, and it was really smart, was he just said, the pressure's not on Zion Williamson. We brought in veteran guys like Derek Favors and JJ Redick. David Griffin said, we have surrounded him with other guys that have experience in the league. Brandon Ingram, obviously, we didn't know at the time, but turned into an all-star.
So really, he was special.
What's that?
You knew Brandon Ingram was special. He was like the main piece in the AD deal.
For sure. But he followed up. I think what Griffin did was he took the pressure off of him, and he followed it up by making moves that made it so realistically it wasn't all on Zion. I think, unfortunately, the way the season started, I think a lot of people did look around and say, 7-23, maybe Zion needs to rescue this team. But they actually started playing a lot better from about Christmas until January 22nd when Zion made his debut. And I think that was when the Pelicans showed the potential that they had as a team, and that it was. And obviously, when Zion came in, it just added that another level and another dynamic to the team. But they did make it so that he didn't ever feel like, I don't think that, I'm the number one pick. I'm one of the most hyped number one overall picks of the last however many years, and I have to save the season. So that was good, I think, just to let him play and just kind of let him focus on what some of the things that he does best are.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, so, we're going to talk about Zion a little bit more. As a Heat fan, I was very salty on that day that the Pelicans got the number one overall pick. I think the entire NBA was. The Heat wound up getting Tyler Hero, which was still pretty, compensation-wise, pretty solid.
Sure.
And then it was between you guys. It was the Knicks and I forget who else. Oh, and the Lakers, right?
Yeah. Lakers and Memphis. They were that was the last 4 alive. Yeah.
So can you give us like an idea of what you went through in your mind, like when it was like the top 3 or top 4 picks left, and then only to find out that you guys did win the lottery that day?
It's funny. I was actually there in Chicago for the lottery, and obviously they hold the drawing in like a back room, and no one knows what the results are until they announce it on TV. And so all of us found out at the same time as everyone else. But it was funny because after the way last season was controversy filled with the stuff with the Lakers and Anthony Davis requesting a trade, it was so weird to see it come down to the 4 teams that I said for the Lakers and the Pelicans to still be in the mix when it was down to the last 4 teams. So it just kind of blew me away because I went into it, I'm sure all the writers that cover New Orleans, whether it's me or some of the people from the newspaper or websites, they all went into it with a pre-prepared story saying New Orleans ends up with the 8th pick or whatever it was whatever pre-lottery slot they had. Right. So I just in case I wrote something saying that they won the lottery, but of course the whole time you're like, this is never going to see the light of day because it's not going to happen.
Right.
Just for them, for the Pelicans to win it with a 6% chance, it was just mind blowing. It was staggering to me. And it was funny. One of the things that I thought of when you said that you were upset or bitter that the Heat didn't win the lottery and the Pelicans did, it was funny how many people came up to me in Chicago over the following like 3 or 4 days to say, we're so glad that they weren't, of course, people aren't going to come up to me and be like, man, I'm mad at you because the Pelicans won the lottery. But people did say that when it came down to those last 4 teams, that so many people from so many different teams said that they were rooting for it to be either the Pelicans or the Grizzlies that won. Right. So I don't know what that tells you about what people think about the Knicks and the Lakers around the league, but you can draw your own conclusions to that. But that was really a lot of fun though to have, just because I might be sitting in Starbucks or something writing, because we were also there for a few days after the lottery for the draft combine. So all the teams are there in Chicago. I might be sitting in a restaurant or like I said, Starbucks, writing an article and I'm wearing a Pelicans shirt and someone just comes up to me and taps me on the shoulder, someone I've never met before. And it's like, hey, I work for Team X. I'm so glad that you guys in Memphis got 1-2 in the lottery. Because they're like, we were nervous there for a little while that it wasn't going to be that way. So,
right. I mean, that saved the franchise because, the whole drama with AD leaving and then he has the shirt that's all folks, it put a bad taste in the team's mouth, in the franchise mouth to the fans. It almost wasn't even fair. So I feel like the NBA rewarded, even though you can't say they did, maybe they had a few more balls than we knew about. And, they rewarded the team in a way and it saved the franchise. And now, the value of the franchise probably increased more than when they did have AD. Would you say? Yeah,
I mean, for sure. I mean, honestly, I can understand from an outside perspective of how you might say that saved the franchise. I actually don't. I think that's a little bit dramatic just from the standpoint of I think a lot of positive things were happening already because of the front office change and David Griffin taking over. And people knew that the Anthony Davis trade was going to yield probably a lot, which it really ended up doing. So I think things were definitely going in the right direction, but winning the lottery was kind of like the icing on the cake. And obviously I'm not trying to downplay the significance of that because it was a monumental moment. Right. But I think along the lines of what you just said though, too, it was almost, I think Tim, I've said this before recently, for a lot of people, it kind of felt like justice because it was so miserable. The previous season was so miserable because of all this controversial stuff with Anthony Davis.
Right.
And even people that had nothing to do with the team as far as working, like my job, or a lot of fans were just like, the last 20, 30 games were so miserable. It was like I've been with the team since 2005 and I've seen a lot of losing teams going way back, but that was the least fun I've ever had in this job. So that should tell you just how miserable that experience was. So after going through all of that, I think a lot of people in New Orleans, and I'm sure this is extraordinarily biased, of course, to say this, but a lot of people in New Orleans did feel like it was a measure of justice that after everything that happened in a negative fashion, that all of a sudden you have Zion Williamson coming to your city. And I think you might have seen some of the videos that fans posted of themselves watching the lottery in their homes. And it was hilarious to me. And it was just so cool to see like people jumping up and down and screaming and scaring their kids and stuff like that. Certainly. So, I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it. Things were going in the right direction, but that just took it to a whole different level.
Definitely.
All right, so I'm gonna quiz you. What was Zion Williamson's first score? Do you remember what it is?
His first score was I think it was a putback basket against the Spurs.
You're actually right. Yeah, I'm gonna actually put that clip up real quick. All right, so let's see.
Sure.
Screen, the shot clock down to 7. Alexander Walker trying to get that one to go over Pirtle. Could not. And there is Zion Williamson, his first NBA basket.
All right, so we're hoping that we see a lot of that from Zion Williamson, right? Explain to me, like, the gift that you see that Zion Williamson has, because this is something that he's going to be able to do more than likely in the NBA for his career, right? Because the way he bullies so many players around him. I watched a couple games of Zion Williamson already, and he can have 3, sometimes even 4 people around him, and he will still come down with the ball.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different plays that people pointed to a lot. He only played 19 games, but there's still a bunch of clips where he just manhandled somebody. There was a play against Oklahoma City where he basically shoved Steven Adams out of the way, and a lot of people were like, "Who does that to Steven Adams?"
Yeah,
and so I mean, there's so many examples of that. I think just the combination of the clip that you showed against the Spurs where he's just able to overwhelm people physically right underneath the basket, combined with how athletic he is, and he's catching like 60-foot alley-oops from Lonzo Ball. That's just something that we haven't seen before. And I think, you didn't have to be a basketball fan to see within the first 3 minutes of his first preseason game that he was going to be such a handful and so difficult to stop. I remember I was there sitting by the court before the Atlanta preseason game, which was the first one they had, and I was just like, this guy is ridiculous. Like, anyone that thought that he was going to have trouble adapting to the NBA or have some of the major rookie adjustment problems is crazy, because he's too physically gifted for the vast majority of the guys that have to guard him.
Nice. And you said off camera that you have met him before on multiple occasions. He's just a kid. But is there anything different in his personality that, I mean, you're around others. Brandon Ingram can be considered a kid. He's 22. Is there something about his confidence or his personality that you can see, that's unique?
Yeah, I would say the most interesting thing about Zion that jumps out is how normal he is. He's a very grounded person. He seems to be very unselfish and very humble. And I think from everything I've heard and from people talking about him, a lot of it comes back to his parents, that his parents, especially his mother, instilled in him I'm sure from the first time that people started praising Zion for his basketball ability when he was probably 14 or 15 or maybe even younger than that. She told him, treat everyone the same. You're no better than anybody else. You're no bigger than anybody else. And it seems like one of the things I've been impressed with how he carries himself is he has been very consistent with sticking with that he relates really well to people. There's a few times during the season where a reporter in another city would ask a question and Zion would ask the reporter back a question, not in like a sarcastic way or being a jerk, but just being like, hey, I'm genuinely curious about your perspective on this. And there's guys in the NBA that play 10, 12 years that never think like that. So right. I'm just really impressed by the way he just turned 20 this week, actually on Monday. I'm just so impressed by the way he handles everything. Also, sometimes on the road, or always on the road when he's out before the game, even before he made his official debut, there'll be dozens of fans, a couple hundred fans watching him warm up. It's almost like Steph Curry already, where people are getting to the arena early to watch him. There was a game in Sacramento this year where there was like 1,000 people. I'm not even exaggerating, including, of course, tons of kids that love him. Right. All watching him work out before a game that he wasn't going to play in, because that was prior to him returning from his injury. So, he's got a lot of stuff thrown at him, but he does an incredible job. I know when I was 19 or 20, I would have freaked out and I would have never been able to handle 1/10 of the stuff that he deals with as far as his fame and notoriety. So I'm sure he will. I just hope he stays that way, because, man, he's a really popular guy, and I think a lot of his teammates love him too, just because of all the stuff that I just mentioned, as far as that he relates well to people, and he doesn't act like he's better than anyone, even though he's obviously become a megastar already before he even got out of his teenage years.
Right.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, he's a kid. So sometimes kids, they show their emotions on their face, right? So on the day of the draft, it didn't look like Zion Williamson was really happy, to be picked up by the Pelicans, all right? Do you think it was more of like a shock because he was kind of mentally preparing himself for like the Knicks or something like that? Or
you mean the lottery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's true. He didn't look super excited that we usually see the Zion Williamson, right? I'm not saying he was mad to go to the Pelicans. I'm just saying you have your mind on something, and then you're like, oh crap, like what's gonna happen to me?
I'd have to go back and watch the tape because it was more than a year ago now. But I think I remember seeing that the clip that came up on TV maybe indicated that. But if you watched like the whole 30, 45 seconds of it, it made a lot more sense in terms of his reaction. And I don't think based on anything that he said or his father said that there was any hesitation about coming to New Orleans.
Yeah.
So I'll say this too, and I'm not saying this as a negative towards you, but this is also not going to be anything I don't think that you guys will disagree with me on. There's a contingent of media members, national media members, that were invested in the idea of him not coming to New Orleans or not going to Memphis. They wanted him to. This is not a newsflash. They wanted him to go to New York City or they wanted him to go to L.A. A lot of media members are based in either the Northeast or in L.A. ESPN has an entire studio in L.A. and an NBA show that's based there. Yeah. So I think a lot of the stuff. And of course, I'm speaking from my perspective and this perspective of New Orleanians. When we first heard that, it was kind of annoying because it was like, we know exactly where you're coming from when you're trying to say that he didn't want to come to New Orleans. You're actually saying what's more accurate is you wanted him to not go to New Orleans, and I think that's where a lot of the narrative came from. I mean, we can agree or disagree on that. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm fine.
That's just my perspective on that I thought a lot of that stuff was
I feel like you're getting a little bit of the hate from everybody in the league that you got Pelican. I just want you to remember we went through that for many years when LeBron was here. All right.
Oh, 100%. I can totally picture that there was a lot of bitterness about the fact that there was, I don't know, you guys know better than me. There's probably 4 or 5 cities that thought they had a good chance to get LeBron. And then either when he announced that he was going to Miami or when the reports started going out that he might go to Miami, a lot of people from Chicago, New York, so on and so forth were like mad because they were like, wait a minute, where did Miami even come in the equation? So yeah, I know exactly what you mean by that. And
we're still hated by it. I mean, there's many teams that still to this day say that the Heat underachieved.
Right. Know? Four appearances in 4 years, but that wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
So have you got a chance to see these prices on Zion Williamson rookie cards, autograph cards?
No, I haven't. I have not.
Whoa. Well, you have to take a look. If you check on eBay, you type in his name, Zion Williamson autograph, you will not find anything below $500, and they go as north as like $50,000. So wow. So he's like a can't miss prospect. Obviously, you know this, but it seems like the fans are heavily invested in him. And I guess I don't even know what to think of it. He actually changed the entire sports card market, him and Ja Morant. So is there any chance at this point that Zion Williamson can steal the Rookie of the Year from Ja Morant, or you think it's already decided? Or maybe Kendrick Nunn slips in and steals it?
I think he does have a chance. Zion does have a chance. Kendrick Nunn maybe has an outside chance if the Heat go all the way to the finals and win. Right. But I think you got to give him consideration for Rookie of the Year. But unfortunately, it's a regular season award. But going back to Zion, I think he has a chance if the Pelicans make the playoffs and the Grizzlies. And obviously, to do that, they would have to bounce the Grizzlies out of the playoffs. So at that point, when the regular season is considered over, the only thing that I have doubts about is I think that there are probably a lot of voters who've already decided that they think Ja Morant should win Rookie of the Year. And honestly, like, I can't argue too much just based on the games played part of it. Ja Morant, I'm not sure exactly. He's probably played about 60 games, and I think he missed a few, but not many. And Zion's only played 19. So for a voter out there to say, almost regardless of what happens in Orlando, I'm going to vote for Ja Morant because the most regular season games that Zion can play is 27, obviously. I understand. In the big picture, people have asked me this question a lot, and I totally get it, but of why, because it's a huge conversation around the NBA. But I think in the scheme of things, really, I don't think it really matters that much if he doesn't win Rookie of the Year. There's been plenty of guys that didn't win Rookie of the Year and ended up having way better careers than the guy who did win it. So I think way more important thing for Zion is to just stay healthy and keep getting better. And whether he wins Rookie of the Year or not, I'm sure he would love to win it, but I think it's a lot more important to him that the team makes the playoffs and gets a chance to play against the Lakers in the first round of the Western Conference.
Yeah, I don't know how fair it would be if Zion Williamson won Rookie of the Year. I feel like Ja Morant has done a lot. He's carried that franchise on his back first year. I honestly think if Zion Williamson wasn't in the league, I think Ja Morant would be getting a lot more publicity than he's getting now. Because what he's doing with the Grizzlies, it's pretty insane still. But like we said, Zion Williamson's getting the bulk of the publicity and all that.
Yeah, and I would add too, like, just along the lines of what you just said, it is kind of unfair to Ja Morant to take away in any shape or form what he's done this year. I mean, Memphis was supposed to be like the worst team in the West. I think a lot of people picked them to finish 15th out of 15. So for him to come in and do what he did as a point guard, a position that's really hard to come into the league and make all kinds of adjustments, and not to mention the talent at that position, which there's 20 great point guards probably in the NBA or close to that. So, yeah, I don't want to take anything away from him. He's been phenomenal. I love watching him play.
Yeah. And the cool thing about him is he's not doing it by only scoring, right? Like, he's also – the assist numbers are there. Like, he's doing it everywhere. Talking about Zion Williamson, I don't know if you saw NBA 2K. So their next-gen photo, right, is a picture of Zion Williamson. That's going to be for the PS5, the next-gen, right? The regular one is going to be Damian Lillard. Do you think that the NBA 2K – do you think that – I feel it, but you might not. Do you feel like they kind of jumped the gun putting Zion Williamson as the next-gen cover for the whole game? I mean, because I feel like there's a lot of other players next-gen wise that could have been the picture. And like we said, Zion Williamson has only played 20 games.
Zion sells, though.
I honestly haven't done any research and don't know really at all what goes into it. But I will say this is totally a guess from left field. But I'm guessing that they base everything just on popularity. Yeah. And so even if he hadn't played the entire season, that maybe he still would have been on the cover just because they know how staggering his popularity is. I mean, it's hard to even explain unless you see it. I'm sure people have a relative understanding, but just I can't believe how popular the guy is. We had Chris Paul here in New Orleans. We had Anthony Davis, and they were super popular. And it's at a certain point in their career, maybe it was 3 or 4 years into their career, they got to the point where on the road, when their name is announced, they get cheered by opposing fans, which is a pretty significant milestone as far as the appreciation that people have for you. Zion was, I think, the first day that he played a Pelicans game was already like at way beyond that level that those two guys were in the 6 or 7 years in their career. So I think that's really what I would say about the cover is that they're just going with what they know is going to be popular.
Yeah, it's just weird because you think, like, let's talk about who the face of the franchise is right now, right? LeBron James. He was never on the cover of NBA 2K his rookie year, or like I don't even think after like 3 or 4 years he was on the cover. So it's kind of weird. You know what?
What's an interesting discussion, and I probably don't want to get into this too deep because I don't know, you guys don't want to be here forever, but the difference, one of the big differences between when LeBron James came into the NBA in 2003 and when Zion came into it in 2019 is that Zion had like 3 or 4 years where he was on all these viral videos and YouTube was so big that his popularity, I think his maybe not even popularity might even be the perfect word. It might be like more of like his celebrity status was actually probably higher than LeBron's just based on the fact that social media is so huge now. When LeBron came in 2003, he was a huge name. His games were on ESPN. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, just like Zion. But I think it's just a different level. It's hard to even compare. And I think that might be part of it. It's a totally different era now than it was.
No, yeah, you're definitely right. I mean, they had their high school games on ESPN and everything, but still, you're 100% right. It's not the same as everybody watching the clips of Zion Williamson over and over and over. And I mean, how many times did people watch him like running out of his shoes from how like big fast he is? You know, like
and the shoes sold for like $20,000 or something ridiculous.
I mean, apparently his shoes worth $20,000, but yeah.
So I'll bring up a new topic. Not only did you get Zion this offseason, you also inherited a family, the Ball family. Has LeVar Ball been around? I haven't seen too much of him. He's kind of quieted down. I feel like maybe that was part of the trade agreement or so. Any feedback on him at all?
No, he hasn't really been around. I haven't met him before. I think he's definitely been to some games. I remember the first game of the season in Toronto. He was there, and I was sitting in the media room, and all of a sudden I look up on the screen, and TSN, which shows Raptors games in Canada, he was doing a pregame interview. So I thought that he was maybe going to be around a lot more during the season and doing interviews. But like you said, he really hasn't. He's really kind of been a lot quieter this year than he has been previously. I don't really know the reason for that, but no, he hasn't. He's definitely not like a daily presence or even like a monthly presence around the team, just as, like I said, evidenced by the fact that I haven't even met him before.
Wow.
At the trade deadline, was there any interest to trade away Drew Holiday? And if there was, what was stopping it from happening?
I'm not sure if there was interest or not. I think the main reason I think to not trade him was to keep, I mean, obviously the fact that he's a great player and he was all defensive team the last couple of years. The team was headed in a really good direction. And I think they carried that through all the way through March 11th when the season was suspended. They were on a good track. I think it made a lot of sense to keep, whether it was Drew Holiday or whether it was any other guy that was other teams around the NBA were interested in acquiring. It made a lot of sense to just stick with what they had. Not just because they were trending in the right direction, but also the fact that Zion came back January 22nd, and the trade deadline was probably February 5th or 6th, maybe. I can't remember exactly. So to make a major trade after you only had Zion back on the court for basically 2 weeks and you were trying to integrate him into the lineup, get his minutes up because he was under playing time restrictions at first, there was just a lot of stuff going on. So to me, I wasn't surprised at all that the Pelicans didn't make any moves at the trade deadline, because it just seemed like it would have just added another disruption to what had started out as a season where there were a lot of guys injured. There was a lot of people in and out of the lineup. Zion obviously missed the first 44 games. So it was great to have a steady lineup and rotation over the last portion of the season. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see it through to mid-April when, they would have had even more time. But now we're going to see that in these 8 seeding games, to see the group of guys that was really playing really well, especially that starting lineup was statistically one of the best, if not the best, in the NBA in the minutes that they played together.
And, we mentioned David Griffin, also the compensation you guys got from the Lakers. What do you think is missing right now on the roster, I guess going into maybe next season or the next few years, to make you guys a legitimate contender, besides also the developmentation of Zion?
Well, it's interesting because, we talked about the different scenarios that they have to try to make the playoffs. I think some people have already forgotten that if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to be back in the lottery. So can they have a miracle happen again? Probably not. But if they can pick, in the top 10 or close to the top 10, they have a chance to add another guy.
Right.
In terms of that could potentially help a lot. Specifically in terms of what they need, I think every team around the NBA is always looking for more shooting, especially with the fact that the 3-point shot has become such a huge part of the game. The Pelicans are pretty high up in the NBA. I think they're third in 3-point percentage, and I think they're top 5 in terms of makes and attempts. So that's not a weakness, but I mean, you always can get more guys that can shoot. And I think maybe adding more defenders might be helpful too. That they do have a good core of a few guys like Lonzo Ball, Drew Holiday, and Derek Favors are definitely above average defensive players. But I think if they can add maybe another guy or two on the wing defensively, that'll always help, because you go against so many of these athletic wing scorers on so many teams, and the Pelicans always ask Drew Holiday to guard that guy I think it would be very helpful to have a little bit more help in that part of the game.
Got you.
What's it gonna take for you guys to get that last spot? Like what like how many games do you think you at least need to win, and how many games do you think that the Grizzlies and the Blazers need to lose?
Well,
math-wise, that's easy, but like if you weren't counting on them, how many games do you think you at least need to win to get a chance?
I think we've talked about this a ton in the last few weeks on our site and different platforms. I think the consensus is that they have to win at least 5 games to have a chance to keep their season going. If they win 6, I think they'll have a really good chance of continuing their season. Partly because, and this is a little bit complicated, but they play a lot of teams that they're close to in the standings. So if hypothetically they finish 6-2, they probably will have beaten some combination of Memphis, San Antonio. They play Sacramento twice. So if you add all those things together, I think if they win 5, they have a really good chance. And if they win 6, they almost definitely will at least move on to the play-in round. Now, obviously what Memphis does is almost completely out of their control. But as far as the first goal being to just not get eliminated and not be going home after these 8 games, I think they need to win 5 or 6 of the 8.
Alrighty. And all right, so let's jump real quick to the Miami Heat. Let's say you had your picking of one player off the Miami Heat's roster, whether it be Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, just to add to your team right now. Who would you take? Or it could have been somebody I didn't mention either.
I'm concerned about – I'm going to get in trouble for tampering if I do that. But I will say, somebody an athletic big, I think, is always helpful. Somebody that can help a defense. That type of player, I think, is becoming so much more and more valuable. This is another conversation altogether, but we've seen – I'm sure you guys have seen this too the last few years. That's the slow-footed 7'2" center guy. Exactly. He's gone. He's a dinosaur. He's disappearing. So I think the Pelicans, Jackson Hayes has potential to be that guy who he has a lot to learn, and he has a big learning curve defensively. But I think that type of player is definitely somebody that would be really is so valuable on any team.
Have you guys given up on Jahlil Okafor? I know he was a top 5 pick or so. Could he be somebody like that?
I think he's turned into kind of a player who has like a specific niche.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say that they've given up on him at all. I think he basically played and did an amazing job in the instances where Derek Favors missed a bunch of games this year because of injuries earlier in the season, and his mother also passed away, sadly. And then so a lot for a big chunk of the season, the 2 centers that the Pelicans did play were Jackson Hayes and Jahlil Okafor. A lot of games, depending on the matchup, they played Okafor. They started Okafor. Like against Detroit, there was a game where Favors missed that game, and the Pelicans decided, let's start Okafor because he's a good matchup against Andre Drummond. This was obviously before Drummond got traded.
Right.
And he dominated. Okafor had like 20 and 15. And there's been so many instances over the last 2 years where he's been kind of an emergency starter, like a last minute, like, okay, somebody's out, let's start Okafor, and he's going to play a lot of minutes, and he's always come through. Unfortunately for him, he's been the 3rd center a lot of times just because of that. He's had 2 guys in front of him, and a lot of his play, he is that traditional back-to-the-back center. He's definitely more mobile than some of the slow-footed 7-footers that we referenced, but there's still certain matchups that aren't good for him defensively. If he's guarding a guy that is going to be spending a lot of time out on the 3-point arc, they might lean towards playing somebody else more minutes in certain games. So I think he's done a great job. Unfortunately, in the 2 years that he's been here, he's just been in a situation where, like I said, he's been the number 3 center. If he was on a different team, he might be the backup, and he might be able to consistently be on the court every single game instead of only in certain situations.
Got you.
All right, so this is my last question for you, Jim. We talked about this with George Sedano a little bit. Zion Williamson. Do you think he's going to change the league? Are more offensive linemen in football. Are they going to change their careers to play basketball? Because there is more money in basketball, So do you think that what Zion Williamson is doing is going to change the game, and are we going to see more of it?
Man, that's a really interesting question. I think the first thing that stands out to me is, like you said, that it's hard to picture guys Zion's size doing what he does just because he's so such a one-of-a-kind guy and he's so naturally gifted. But I could see a trend where as football participation in football is going down, everyone knows that, that you could see more guys that I don't know if it's going to be the combination of a 6'6" guy who can jump over everybody and is stronger than everyone like Zion. But it is interesting to think that maybe there will be players who grow up with more of a quote unquote football body who decide, I'm going to play a sport that's safer and has maybe a better future as far as how much money you can make and the longevity of your career. So I think that'll be interesting to see. I mean, it's very possible. I'm just skeptical of the idea that there's going to be that many people that are like Zion in terms of just the combination of traits that he has. I feel like we've seen former football players play basketball or vice versa. And it's just, they're still like Jimmy Graham went from playing basketball to football to use the reverse of it. And he's a great athlete, but he still isn't Zion, and like hardly anyone is. So, but that's interesting to think about. I think that'll be something that you can kind of keep one eye on over the next few years to see if there's more guys with that frame that decide to play basketball instead of football.
Yep.
Alrighty. And then my last question is, from an outsider's point of view, how do you feel that Pat Riley, he's been with the Lakers, he's been with the Knicks, now he's with the Heat. What would you say about his career in general, and how do you think he finishes his career?
I mean, his legacy is going to be unbelievable because he was there for the Lakers' 80s glory days, like the best stretch. I'm sure the best stretch of the Lakers. They've had some great stretches, don't get me wrong, but probably the best span of time that they've had in the history of their franchise, which is saying something. Then he was with the Knicks, who, I'm sure there were people when he was there that were like, well, it was disappointing that they didn't win a championship. But I think as time goes on and you see what the Knicks have done over the last 10 or 15 years, you have a lot more appreciation for what Pat Riley did with that franchise when he was there. And then obviously Miami had the same thing where the best stretch of time that they've had as a franchise occurred when he was there. And I know that there were a lot of rough years for the Heat before he got there. So, I mean, that's probably the best way that I would sum up Pat Riley is like everywhere he's gone, they did much better while he was there than before he was there and then after he was there, especially with what you can see with what's happened with the Knicks. So
they're saying we can't lose Pat Riley. He's got to stay here forever.
Yeah,
everybody he leaves, leaves to shit.
Is he thinking about retiring? I honestly haven't heard anything about.
Yeah, I'm not gonna let him think about retiring.
He's just getting older, and he did make a promise that he wasn't gonna leave the franchise in shambles. So and we're almost there as far as picking up the last few guys, whether it's a Giannis or
he wants to leave on a win. Yeah, I mean we don't know.
Do you think?
The biggest win you can have, or if it's an Eastern Conference win, we'll see what happens.
I mean, don't you guys think that you're already like? I know that there's more pieces to add, but even if he stepped aside now, I think they seem to be heading in such a good direction already that he's already been able to put them back on track. Because I know there was a couple years there where they finished right around 500, where I'm sure people were getting impatient and they were saying, this team is in purgatory where people always talk about where they're not good enough to be a threat in the playoffs, but they're not bad enough to pick high in the draft either. To me, it seems like this season just proved that they already have turned around the direction of the franchise. So, I mean, kudos to Pat Riley and the Heat because and this is from an outside perspective, it just seems like it didn't take long for them. I'm sure for Heat fans or people down there, maybe it felt like it longer than it was, but from the outside, it just didn't seem like they were mediocre for that long, and they're already back to what are they, fourth in the East? I think something like that right now. So I mean, you got to be really from an outside perspective. I think you got to be really happy. They've drafted well too with some of the guys that like Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, great picks,
and we didn't have to tank for that.
Exactly.
Or win the lottery,
and that's why as great as it's been that the Pelicans won the lottery, the people who say that you have to be terrible to get better, I think are totally wrong. It's not about where you pick, it's who you pick. And I think Miami totally showed that with they picked guys. Both of those guys were in the double-digit picks. I can't remember exactly. Hero was 13 maybe?
14.
Yeah.
14.
Yeah, and Adebayo was right around there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you pick smart, I'd rather have a front office that does a good job picking 10 through 14 than a front office that constantly makes mistakes that's picking 1 through 5.
Yeah. Well said, Jim. Well said.
Yeah, and you're right. You're 100% right. I mean, we had one of the worst rosters, like for not the worst rosters, but we had some pretty bad rosters with Hassan Whiteside and Tyler Johnson. Those two insanely huge contracts, and we could have easily just said like, hey, you know what, like we can't get rid of these guys, let's just tank, we'll get some really good picks out of this, but he flipped it around and he got rid of these crazy contracts, and now
Raiders,
we're in the position to get Victor Oladipo if we can, or Giannis Antetokounmpo, in 2021. So it's crazy.
And this is again a whole other conversation, but that's one of the reasons why. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I don't like tanking, and I don't like the idea of having a bunch of years where you just tear it down to the beginning and start from scratch. But one of the reasons I don't like it is because it basically takes away all accountability from the front office. You basically give yourself an excuse to be terrible for 3 or 4 years, and no one can ever. You kind of disassociate yourself with the results on the court. And to Miami's credit, they didn't do that. I don't like the fact that some of the GMs basically buy themselves 3 or 4 years where they don't have to do anything. And if they win 15 games, they can say like, oh, you shouldn't criticize us for winning 15 games because that was all part of the plan. And I think with how competitive sports are and people are in sports, that's a terrible way to operate where there's a reason we keep standings basically. And so if you say it doesn't matter how many games we win, I feel like that goes totally against the whole idea of sports and competitiveness.
Yeah, we're not the 76ers.
You said their name, not me. No,
I know.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, they're a great example of that. That they, for a lot of people, praise Sam Hinkie, and I'm sure there's valid reasons to praise him in certain ways. But he also, I feel like people are I don't understand how people don't see the aspect of it where if you put yourself in a position where you're not accountable for the results, how you buy yourself job security without actually doing anything. So I like the GMs who are aggressive and do what Miami did way more than the guys who say, let me have 3 or 4 years where I can't be fired because the team is terrible, but I'm just going to say that's all part of the plan.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thanks everybody for watching us. Make sure you follow us on our Twitter. Thanks again, Jim, for being on with us. Hopefully we'll have you on again. If they make it on the 8 seed, maybe we'll get you on to talk some Pelicans Lakers matchups, and maybe we can. And if they definitely knock off the Lakers, I want to just get my foot in the door now and say we're the first one to get you on the show so you can talk to us about what happened. All right.
I can definitely promise you that if they the only caveat I have to throw in there is that you might have to do it immediately because I'm sure there'll be tons of people that try to get me on their show. But I will guarantee you right now that if that happens, that I will say yes to being on the show. And I appreciate you guys having me today. It was a heck of a lot of fun just talking basketball and even talking a little Miami Heat with you guys.
Thank you, Jim. That was awesome. Have a great weekend.
You too, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Later. Thank you.